Good morning, listeners. It is Wednesday, July 25th. I'm happy to be speaking to you on a lovely Wednesday morning. If you can hear some noise in the background, I've got cicadas going, I hear an airplane, and there's a freight train going by in the tracks that are a couple blocks away. So you may hear an occasional squeak from the wheels of that. Overall, a sonically rich environment in which to record my silly podcast where I go for a walk. I didn't even introduce myself. This is a long cold open, I guess. Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you as I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. I hope that your day is going as well as mine is so far. It's been a pleasant morning. My daughter is finishing her swim season, so I won't have to take her to practice anymore after this week for about a month. So that should be a nice relief in the schedule. Maybe we'll get a little more game time in. Yesterday was my usual game night, and we in fact took the children. I took the children with me, as I mentioned several times. The game night I go to is called Toggle Gaming. It meets at a bar in Palatine, which is a little bit of a hike for me. It's about 45 minutes drive. And my design partner, Rob, brought his two kids as well. So we had a full car of 6 that went, including 4 children. That was pretty fun to watch the kids play some games there. I got to try, what was it called? Boy, howdy, I should remember what the games that I'm going to talk about are called if I want to be able to talk about them on the podcast, shouldn't I? So we played a number of games there. We played Slamwich, which is a pretty goofy game. We played a number of times. They have a jumbo copy there that's pretty cool. Played a game of Biblios that I thought I was doing badly at, and then I ended up winning in a tiebreaker with my daughter. She was pretty furious about that because she won the 2 categories that she won vigorously, and I won the 2 categories that I won barely, and I still won. So, haha. We played Codenames Pictures a couple times, and I got to try out a game called Doodle Rush, which has it's got an interesting mechanism where you have pictures you've drawn, and or you get 6 tiles, and your goal is to draw the. Hey, I found a caterpillar. So you take 6 tiles and you get 6 words, and your goal is to draw the pictures on the tiles, and you have 1 minute. So it's played. You get a minute to draw, and so you get a few done, but they're not good. And then you flip it, and then you show other people the tiles, and while you're showing other people your tiles, you're looking at theirs, and everybody's trying to guess the tiles. And if you guess correctly, then you get to take the tile. And then after the minute is over, then the timer flips again, and you get another minute to work on your drawings. You're still doing the same words, but now you have fewer drawings to work on because some of them have been taken. And then you flip it over and you show your tiles again. And so it's 3 rounds. And one moment that was particularly funny and a little shaming for me, one of the people had drawn a picture of what looked to me like a king with a crown on, and I said, king. Nope. Crown. Nope. Royalty. Nope. And I went through every synonym and adjective and thing I could think of having to do with royals and royalty before I finally said queen. I don't know, somehow in my head, the character that was drawn was male, even though it was basically a stick figure. So I guess I still have that inherent sexism that's part of American culture. Like I said, pretty shaming that it took me that long to figure out. I felt like that time that I heard that mind puzzle, this is when I was in school, but that time that I heard that mind puzzle about the doctor whose son got in a car accident. The doctor said, I can't operate on this person, it's my son. But the kid's father had been killed in the car accident. Who was the doctor? Of course, it was the mother. But the point of that is to suggest or to help illustrate the inherent sexism and assumptions we make in our culture. And even though I could defend myself a little bit by saying that that face that had been drawn looked more male to me, it's still pretty shameful. So, always more to work on, I guess. But anyway, Doodle Rush was fun. And let's see what else we played. That's pretty much it, but it was a good time. It's fun to take kids out to a game night like that. Let them see how adults socialize and have fun. But actually, something else from yesterday that I wanted to share. So my design partner and I are working on a number of things. We have a Kickstarter coming up soon, so don't be surprised if you encounter an ad on this podcast soon. I apologize in advance, but that's part of the sinister reason I do this podcast, is to build outreach with audiences so that if and when we put a Kickstarter out there, we have a few more people who might hear about it. Whether you decide to back or not is entirely up to you, and whether the game sounds interesting to you or not. But we'll talk about that again sometime soon. But so we were doing some design work, and then we were talking about games, looking at the games on my shelf. So we were looking at the 2-player game that I have, Stronghold, which is about the siege of a castle. I believe I talked about it in a previous episode after I played it with my buddy Paul. But it's a really interesting game where one person plays the human beings inside a sort of fantasy castle, and you're trying to defend it against a sieging army of goblins, orcs, and trolls while you're waiting for reinforcements to arrive from somewhere else. Think of the Battle of Helm's Deep as an example. The idea is that the stronghold cannot hold out forever. They just need to hold out long enough for the reinforcements to arrive and help them. So in the game terms, that means you have to survive 7 rounds. And survive is really a knife edge, because there are something like 8 different areas on the board, and each area needs to be defended. But of course, the orcs, trolls, and goblins don't have the resources to check all the areas at once. There's a blend of different places they might go. The idea is that the game balances itself by letting the orc player take as long as they want to prepare their attacks. Maybe not as long as they want, but they have a significant amount of choices to take in terms of preparing their attacks. But each choice they make gives a little hourglass token to the human player. And then after each step, the orc player takes their prep turns, then the human player spends those hourglasses that they've just earned from the orc player. Or maybe they save, I think they can choose not to, and they can save them up. Okay, it's been a while since I played it. I have to double check exactly how that part works. But the human player gets a certain amount of hourglass tokens that they can spend in response to the orc players using resources to prepare. And the result is that the human player gets roughly the same amount of support in the game that the orc player does. Well, in this game that I played with my buddy, I think it took us maybe 3.5 hours, something like that, to get down to the end of the game. We were in round 7. It's the last chance for the orcs, trolls, and goblins to win. And he mounted an offensive on 2 sides. And there's one there's one thing that I hadn't done yet that I could do that basically like invalidated one of his attacks. I'm like, this wall is protected from all the attackers or whatever. So it came down to this other wall, and he had enough troops that if he did any damage to my wall with his catapult, he would win. But if my wall held against his catapult, then his troops were not quite strong enough to overcome the wall. And the catapult, if I recall, the way the catapult deck works, it gets smaller with each time you miss, you take that miss card out of the catapult deck. So the catapult gets more accurate with each shot. So and if I recall, at the time it had say 2 hit cards and 2 miss cards left in the deck, so it was roughly even whether it would hit or not. And so my buddy flipped the card and he missed, and we played out the rest of the round, but we knew from the math, because it's pretty deterministic, that he didn't have quite enough people to breach the wall, and so I ended up winning. But so the whole 3.5 hour game came down to this one card draw. So I was telling this story to my design partner, and he's like, so it all just was a coin flip? Didn't you just have flipped the coin at the beginning and saved the 3.5 hours? Which he was saying that in jest. But to me, it was an interesting design question to think about. How do you consider the way that randomness shapes a game in terms of the outcome of the game, particularly when randomness is a minimal part of the game? I guess another way to put it is, how many keystone moments should you be able to point to where you say, this is the thing that made the game win, this is the thing that made you win or lose? Because both my opponent and I had many opportunities throughout the game where we could have done something a little differently, and perhaps if we had done so, things would have turned out differently. Maybe if he had bought the wooden shields for his guys a little earlier, my archers wouldn't have been as effective, or this or that. I mean, there's a variety of different things that each of us could have done. There's a lot of choices in the game, and each of those may have tipped the balance a little bit more so that that final catapult wasn't necessarily the make or break moment. But there's always going to be a make or break moment, is there not? I guess in a Euro game where you're trying to get points, there will be times where you could say, I'm not sure what else I could have done to optimize my play better. But if somebody else gets more points than you, they figured out a way. It's interesting to think about. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, as a designer, do you want that fulcrum moment to be visible? Or do you want it to be obscured by whatever kinds of chance there are? Because in a competitive game, there almost always is that fulcrum moment. You think about sports events, and sometimes they'll say somebody scored the winning goal. Unless it's the only goal of the game, it's not the winning goal. It's one of the goals that helped you win. But if each team scores in a soccer game, a football game, football, if each team scores 2 goals and then one person scores the 3rd goal right at the end of the game, sometimes people will say that's the winning goal. It is, except the other 2 goals contributed equally to the win. They just happened earlier in the game. And I think that our experience of games often comes down to these moments, right? I don't remember hardly any of the other tactical or strategic moves I made during this whole long game of Stronghold, but I do remember that final moment, the final turn, particularly my one move and his, and the random chance of that catapult. By contrast to the more complex games, it's not always clear when a choice made or not made could have swung the balance of the game. So I guess that's my design question for you, or my play question for today. As you think about games you've played, games that have memorable moments, how much of the pleasure from a game comes from your ability to identify when you won? Is that something that you have experienced before? What kinds of memorable moments stand out to you as you consider games you've played in the past? Particularly, kind of like a Shaggy Dog Story, games that are longer, I think the memorable moments stand out more because the game was longer. You invested so much time in it. Drop by Board Game Geek Guild 3269, that's at boardgamegeek.com, and say hello. Let us know what you think. My username there is Wombat929. You can also reach out to me at Twitter at RattleboxGames, or you may email me, Brendan@RattleboxGames. Let me know what you think about today's discussion topic and what you've been playing lately. We're almost at the end of July, so I'm going to do another top of the stack update soon. So I'd love to hear what your top of the stack ideas are. All right, that's about it for me. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Heads.
A weaker man might be moved to re-examine his faith. If in nothing else, at least in the law of probability.
Heads.
Consider. 1. Probability is a factor which operates within natural forces. 2. Probability is not operating as a factor. 3. We are now held within sub, or supernatural forces. Discuss.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.